Good evening, everyone. We'll just give it a few more minutes for a couple more people to join. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to our Homelessness Response Community Update. My name is Susie Oki, and I'm the Community Relations Specialist for the Homelessness Response team here at the city. So these community meetings are a time for us to provide an update to all of you and for you all to ask questions about the work that we're doing here in the city. The program will run from about 6 to 7 p.m. Presenting with me today is Larry Mwale, Homelessness Response Manager, Miley Ernest, Homelessness Response Coordinator, and Gina Liebig, our Principal Management Analyst. So Gina, do you want to go to the next slide? So this is our agenda for the evening. We're going to review the strategic plan, the homelessness response program overview, the 2024 PID count, recent federal and state news, and an outreach case study. And we'll be closing with a question and answer. So we'll be taking questions throughout the presentation using the question and answer function at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Does everybody know where that is? You may want to take a second just to use it. Well, the chat is not going to be, and the raised hand function are not going to be enabled during this presentation. And any of the questions that you submit through the Q&A will be shared with all of our panelists. So know that everybody is receiving those, and we'll figure out the best person to respond. If we don't get to your questions, we will have you will have the opportunity to email in any other questions that come up, and we'll respond to each of you. So know that your questions are heard. So let's get started. Larry?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it, and we look forward to sharing these updates with you all. I want to start this evening with an overview of our recently adopted Homelessness Response Strategic Plan. This plan was adopted by the City Council just back in June, updating what previously had been our action plan that had been in place for the last couple of years. I'll go through it in sort of more of an overview, but you can find the full plan on our website, which is cityofsantacruz.com/homelessness. But really, this plan builds upon the success and work of our previous action plan. This really guides our work over this next 3-year period from 2024 to 2027. This plan ties directly to the citywide strategic plan, of which homelessness is one of the focus areas. I believe it's one of 7 focus areas. And this plan as well is aligned with both county and state plans that are working to address and resolve homelessness in our communities. The plan articulates a number of specific goals, specifically working to decrease homelessness, also prevent homelessness, keeping people from falling into homelessness, increasing affordable housing, reducing the impact of encampments, protecting the environment and our natural resources, and building regional capacity and partnerships to resolve homelessness. And the strategic plan was developed really with an intentional and robust community engagement approach and strategy. We had 8 stakeholder meetings with community members that include listening sessions with people experiencing homelessness and other lived experience, business groups, staff from the city, partner agencies, and also included a survey, an online survey that we asked community members to complete, and we had nearly 700 responses from all of you in the community. So next slide, please. So I want to share a little bit about the results from the online survey. As I mentioned, really tremendous response and feedback, hearing from all of you out in the community about your thoughts on this topic. And this is what we heard, sifting through those surveys. What we heard as priorities for community members are accessible parks and open space. We heard concerns around safety. We heard business and economic concerns. We heard humanitarian concerns for people experiencing homelessness and environmental concerns. We heard feedback related to equitable enforcement of the law, a lot about community well-being and quality of life, a desire for clean neighborhoods and streets, affordable housing and housing solutions, really trying to address the systemic factors that are driving homelessness, as well as the need for service provision and support services for people experiencing homelessness. So thank all of you who may have participated, that are here tonight, that may have responded to that survey. It was an important part, along with the other stakeholder interviews, and really informing the update to our action plan and leading to the development of the strategic plan. Next slide, please. So I want to talk briefly, just share the 5 different focus areas that make up this strategic plan, very similar to the focus areas that were in the original action plan that this develops and builds upon. The first area is building capacity and partnerships, and really the strategies in this focus area are looking at developing organizational capacity within the city and internal collaboration. We've established city teams in public works and public safety and in our homeless response division to do key elements of this work. It's important to collaborate with community-based and faith-based organizations to really grow collective capacity. This is an issue that requires a role for all of us if we're going to have impact and work towards resolving homelessness. So I mentioned it's important to work in alignment with the county, and so this plan aligns with strategies that are in the regional plan in Santa Cruz County. Strategies around legislative advocacy, whether we're looking at policy changes in the public policy landscape related to homelessness and housing, looking at funding sources and sustainable funding to be able to do the work in the community. It involves community engagement, events like this, informing the community about what our work looks like, the impact we're having, areas that we are continuing to look at working on. And again, as I mentioned, establishing sustainable funding sources so that we can continue to do this work that is having impact. Next slide, please. The next focus area is affordable and supportive housing. Again, really the solution to homelessness is housing. So these are strategies that are focused on working to retain, protect, and increase housing supply, particularly for extremely low income, expanding permanent supportive housing, increasing access to housing navigation and other essential services, developing a navigation center, and looking at homeless prevention efforts, keeping people in housing. One of the things that we've been seeing, not just in Santa Cruz, but across the state of California, is our systems are becoming more robust and successful and efficacious in moving people from homelessness into housing. The problem is with the affordable housing crisis that we have, more people are falling into homelessness than we're able to get through the system in the same period of time. So much cheaper, much more effective to focus on prevention where we can. Next slide. The next focus area is environmental stewardship. Strategies in this focus area include addressing the impacts and neighborhood concerns related to encampments and refuse, trying to work to reduce illegal dumping and hazardous waste and other debris in our streets and open spaces, and really working to address wildfire concerns and flood protection. Next slide. A large component of our work in homelessness response here in the city of Santa Cruz is in the area of shelter care and support. And the strategies that we're focused on here are working to ensure equity and access to all services in the city. We're working to reduce the number of unsheltered individuals by providing emergency shelter and supporting programs. Key examples include the City Overlook Shelter at the Armory Building in De La Vega Park, which has space for 135 participants. The 1220 River Street Transitional Community Camp with a capacity for 30 people, as well as our safe parking programs, both our overnight safe parking program, which is from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. You'll hear a little bit more about that later. We've got capacity presently for up to 32 spaces, as well as the long-term 24/7 safe parking program that is also up at the Armory Building that has capacity for approximately 15 to 20 recreational vehicles. This work also involves connecting people to behavioral health and medical services and really trying to improve and assist people in navigating kind of the complex web and network of social and health services in our community. That in particular is something that we heard in our listening sessions with people experiencing homelessness about the complexity of navigating that system. So the work of our outreach team and other service providers in the community to try to work with people to help navigate the system is a critical approach. Next slide, please. Community safety. This is another area where the community survey, we heard a lot of concerns around safety from the community. And here the strategies are looking at equitably enforcing criminal behavior, trying to work to decrease the number of calls to law enforcement related to people experiencing mental health crises, trying to work with our county partners in a crisis response system, and really trying to provide access to basic health needs to people on the street. So that's a quick overview of our strategic plan. Again, you can see the full plan on our website at cityofsantacruz.com/homelessness. So what about some of our accomplishments, some of our wins over the last couple of years? Last in the 2024 point in time count, we saw a 36% decrease in people experiencing homelessness in the city of Santa Cruz compared to 2023. We've been able to move through city-sponsored programs, specifically 184 people, into more stable housing. We've seen an increase in affordable housing units of over 1,000. Next slide. We've been able to reconnect 126 people with friends and family through our Homeward Bound program. There's been over 900 people that have been served through our shelter and safe parking programs. And again, we continue to have capacity for 165 people through our safe sleeping spaces in the city. So those are some of our accomplishments. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done and continues to be done, but we've been achieving success. As I mentioned, the point in time year over year is down 36%, was down the year before. So I think that speaks to some of the success and efficacy of the approach that we've been taking. But again, there's still lots more work that needs to be done. With that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Miley Ernest, for the next set of slides.
Hello, everybody. I'm Miley Ernest. I'm the new Homelessness Services Coordinator. I've been with the team for just over 2 months. So I'm ready to get going with all this information I have for you today. As Larry mentioned, there are a couple of safe sleeping programs that the city oversees and operates. One is 1220 River Street, which is a transitional community camp located at 1220 River Street. It is set up on city property and has space for up to 30 tents. Participants have access to basic services as hygiene, cooking facilities, and kind of self-manage their own encampment there. They do meet with a case manager or somebody from our outreach team once a week to work on individual service plans to help them move forward in obtaining their goals, such as looking for jobs and housing, getting together vital documents, and things of that nature as well. This site is considered low barrier, which means partners, pets, and possessions are all welcome. There's no restriction around that as well. To date, the 1220 program has had 122 people that have gone through the program, and 67 of those folks have gone on to permanent housing. That's about a 55% housing rate for them. The other program is the City Overlook program, also known as the Armory, up at the National Guard Armory in De La Viega. It is on the state-owned property, the National Guard property. It provides space for up to 135 tents. It does have 24-hour staff support. As of July, it is now being run by the nonprofit People First of Santa Cruz County, and they are bringing an increase in supportive services to the program in the case of with case managers and healthcare navigators. So they also work on removing barriers to help folks find jobs, look for housing, address medical needs, or other goals that they need to help achieve to help them find a new path in life and move forward. Additionally, the Homeless Persons Health Project of Santa Cruz County brings a mobile unit up there twice a month, so they can have kind of mobile access to healthcare, wound care, vaccinations. There's usually a doctor or a nurse that can also help them make referrals or set up larger appointments through one of the other county clinics if needed. To date, 626 people have gone through the City Overlook program at the Armory, and 96 of them have moved on to permanent housing. Next slide, please. The city also has, as Larry mentioned, 2 safe parking programs. One is the overnight oversized vehicle parking, which is downtown in the public lots. The program operates from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. in certain specified lots that a person is assigned to if they meet the oversized vehicle ordinance. So they are allowed to stay for a minimum of 30 days. They can renew if they want to. In that program itself, we've had 94 folks utilizing those overnight spots. This program doesn't come with any sort of wraparound or support services, but if a person is interested, they are connected to other services within the county via either county services or other nonprofits as well. Sorry, Gina, can you go back one? The other parking program that the city does oversee is the long-term oversized vehicle program, otherwise known as RV Safe Parking Program. That is also operated by People First. It is additionally also at the Armory De La Viega property as well. It has space for about 17 oversized vehicles, and has also provides case management, housing navigation, and access to other services. So folks can work on moving on to permanent housing or finding something other than what their current situation has for them. It is a 24-hour program, so they can park their vehicle. They don't have to move it every day. So it allows them to have a little bit of respite while looking for jobs, looking for housing, taking care of the things that they need to move on. To date, there's been 49 folks that have gone through this program, and 21 have moved on to permanent housing or, permanent housing. Next slide, Gina. City also has partnered with both People First and Santa Cruz County to operate or run severe weather shelters over the last 2 winters. And these are severe emergency style shelters for the folks that are unhoused. It provides a safe, dry place for people to get out of the elements when the weather turns bad. Excuse me. Turns bad. If there's 2 or more consecutive days of the temperature being at or below 38 degrees, or formal flood warnings. So in this past winter, the shelters were open for a total of 13 nights. And also during that time, they were open during the day for folks to also get respite from the weather as well. Excuse me. There's, from the 3 sites, the Veterans Hall in Santa Cruz, Depot Park in Santa Cruz, and the Veterans Hall in Watsonville, there are a total of 106 overnight beds that folks can utilize. Next slide, Gina. Part of the work that we do here at the city is also addressing the impact of encampments. And as Larry mentioned, part of it is the environmental impact. We work closely with the public works and public safety teams and parks additionally to remove trash and debris from the area. And to date, we've removed almost 1,100 tons of debris from parks, open spaces, beaches, the levee, and stuff, and areas like that. Next slide, Gina. One of the things that the city is most proud of over the last few years is the addition of affordable housing units that have been built or in process of being built. One of these examples is the Pacific Station South development. There are 70 affordable housing units. It is 100% affordable. The first 2 floors will have Dientes, which is a low-cost dental clinic, and partnering with the Santa Cruz Community Health Foundation to provide a medical clinic as well. Hopefully occupancy for that unit or that building will start in late this year. Along with the building that we're doing, we are also receiving money. The City of Santa Cruz is one of 19 pro-housing communities in California to receive a portion of $15 million in incentive grants. Part of these grants help folks either avoid eviction, provide rapid rehousing assistance, housing navigation as well. The city received a $500,000 grant called the Pro Housing Initiative Program. We will be partnering with the Community Action Board to administer this grant, and like I stated, it will help folks who are at risk of homelessness, facing eviction, that need rental assistance, so housing stabilization, folks who have maybe just entered into homelessness can access some rapid rehousing funds. So that partnership is unique in helping the folks within the city utilize that money. Next slide, Gina. I will turn it back over to Larry.
Thank you, Miley. Wanted to provide a little more context to trends in homelessness in Santa Cruz County and the city of Santa Cruz. I alluded to some of the change that we've seen in the community over the last 2 point-in-time counts. So the graph that you see on the webinar here shows trends based off the point-in-time counts in Santa Cruz County from 2015 to 2024. Previously, the point-in-time count had been done every other year. That's what HUD has required. The County of Santa Cruz is now doing this on an annual basis post-COVID. And you'll see countywide that the high point from the point-in-time count, which takes place on a single day, that's the point in time, in January, typically the last week in January, although I think in 2023, because of the storms, it was the last week in February. but once a year, peaked at 2,299 countywide. Saw about a 20% decrease in 2023, and then a slight uptick in 2024 countywide, with a total of 1,850 people experiencing homelessness counted. This includes people that are both in shelter situations, emergency shelters, transitional housing, as well as people that are in unsheltered situations, living on the streets. And you can see roughly over the last decade that we've seen roughly 3/4 to 80% of people experiencing homelessness in Santa Cruz County have been in unsheltered situations, which speaks to the critical need for shelter as that first step to get people into better and safer environments as we work on a pathway towards housing. As I noted, so these are the countywide trends. In the city of Santa Cruz specifically, we've seen significant decreases in the point in time count over the last 2 years, with a 29% decrease from 22 to 23, and then a 36% decrease from 23 to 24. Other interesting information that's part of the point in time count, a survey that is conducted for a sample of folks experiencing homelessness. But again, the place of residence that people report at the time that they lost their housing, 80% of survey respondents say that they were living in Santa Cruz County when they lost their housing, which again shows that most of the people that are experiencing homeless here have connection to the community here. While there are examples and folks who are coming from other communities into Santa Cruz, overwhelmingly, folks are from here and homeless in their communities where they grew up. The primary conditions that led to homelessness, according to the survey, 36% of survey residents said that their job was the primary source of their homelessness, job loss. 29% that eviction was the primary reason for becoming homelessness. And again, housing prices and lack of available affordable housing units are key drivers for homelessness locally. Next slide, please. So there's been a good deal of discussion and news related to homelessness and dialogue related to homelessness at both the federal and state level over this summer. There's been a couple of major decisions that have implications for the homeless response landscape. So the first major decision came from the Supreme Court of the United States in the case of Grants Pass versus Johnson in June of 2024. That really was a ruling that builds upon the precedent set in Martin v. Boise. And really what the Grants Pass decision, Grants Pass is, a city in Oregon. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Grants Pass, essentially issuing a decision that allows cities to regulate sleeping and camping on public property, even when there is not adequate shelter available. So Martin v. Boise held that that was a violation of Eighth Amendment rights. The Supreme Court ruled in Grants Pass that it is not, and it allows city officials to enforce public camping ordinances without demonstrating adequate shelter that is offered to a person and that person declines. Next slide, please. Coming on the heels of the Grants Pass decision by the Supreme Court of the United States, California Governor Gavin Newsom issued an executive order the following month, which directed state agencies to urgently address homeless encampments while respecting the dignity and safety of Californians experiencing homelessness. So the executive order applied specifically to state agencies in the governor's capacity. But the governor also urged local governments to use substantial funding provided by the state to take similar action through that. So the question is, well, what does that mean for a jurisdiction, a city like the city of Santa Cruz? Next slide, please. And so the answer to that question for the city of Santa Cruz is it doesn't really change what our approach has been to addressing homelessness. City of Santa Cruz remains committed to providing supportive services, affordable housing, and shelter options, and prioritizing fostering relationships with the community organizations so that we can work effectively to resolve homelessness. We have found that our approach at working here in Santa Cruz that is trying to make shelter capacity available to folks, and to have our outreach team engage people, develop those relationships, and work to get them on a pathway towards housing is working. So we see shelter availability as a fundamental piece. So while those decisions may shape the legal landscape and other communities are responding in different ways, City of Santa Cruz is going to take the same approach that we have been taking for the last 2+ years on this issue. Next slide. And with that, I will turn it back over to Miley.
I'm going to just talk a little bit about our outreach team and kind of give you an overview of what they see each day and how they interact with the folks that are out there unhoused in our city. The outreach team consists of three people, and every day, Monday through Friday, they are out engaging folks, meeting them where they're at. The landscape in which they kind of traverse can be anywhere from downtown, the west side, Pogonip, Friendship Garden, Jessie Street Marsh, Arana Gulch, anything that's within the Santa Cruz city limits. So they have a very vast area that they cover every week. Also, additionally, the Levee and Coral Street are places that they also focus. When they meet with folks, they're meeting with 30 to 40 folks each day, and they engage them to see if they would be interested in trying to access shelter, whether that they be a good fit for the 1220 River Street program or the program at the City Overlook at the Armory. They help them get in contact with mental health services, other resources that they might be needing, substance use services and counseling things of that nature as well. If a person is not necessarily interested in shelter right in that moment, they'll just continue to build relationships with the folks, building trust and rapport, and keep coming back to them and see maybe the next day or in 3 months, that person then might be interested, and that would be their opportunity to get them set up to move into shelter. Their aim is to provide compassionate, practical support for folks, along with information and referrals, and not necessarily just if the person isn't interested, kind of move on to the next person, but they continue to engage them, like I said. They also understand, as well as the city understands, that we are in need of robust services overall, and that includes substance and mental health services as well. These things that many people struggle with, related to all sorts of things that they've encountered in their life. So we understand that. We understand there, may not be enough. And that can also have an effect on folks if they're in treatment and are released back out into the street as well. Next slide, Gina, please. Thank you. The outreach team was awesome enough to provide us with 2 success stories of folks that both went through the 1220 shelter encampment program. One, a gentleman who had been homeless in Santa Cruz for almost 15 years and had been through many programs over the years, and engaging with our outreach team and getting into 1220. He also was able to start to manage his addiction. Excuse me. So he was open and wanted to seek services, and started to maintain his sobriety, and understood that it was a barrier to him finding stability and overcoming homelessness. After being in the program For a few months, he sought out treatments and has been enrolled since. And he had moved, sorry, I'm twisting my words up here, has been maintaining his sobriety in the program and hopes to find housing shortly thereafter. So being in the program and the support of the outreach team has definitely enabled him to maintain his sobriety, and he had space to come back to once he went through the treatment program as well. Another couple who were residing at 1220 had recently obtained housing. Very familiar story as well. Joe, we'll call him Joe, struggled with addiction and was causing very many issues in their relationship. And he decided that in order to make the relationship work and change the dynamic, he needed to focus on his sobriety. So he has been sober for over a year, obtained a job, and now has reengaged with his children and grandchildren. Their relationship is improving as well, and they were able to save money and get back on their feet and move into stable, permanent housing. And again, it's all support of the outreach team who does engage and oversee the folks at the 1220 River Street camp. Next slide, Gina. I will turn this back over to Larry.
Thank you, Miley. So what's next as we look forward? Some of our focus areas include, as I mentioned, working to obtain ongoing sustainable funding. A great deal of the work that we've been able to implement here in the city of Santa Cruz over the last 2+ years has relied on one-time grants from the state of California, principally. So trying to find multi-year ongoing funding sources to continue programs that are showing results is an important objective over the next 3 years. One such example is we recently received funding from the California State Department of Housing and Community Development through the Encampment Resolution Funding. It's a $4 million grant to work on addressing unsheltered homelessness in the Harvey West and Coral Street areas. We're collaborating with Housing Matters on that project. And one of the key additions that it's going to be available through that grant is to be able to expand interim housing on that campus by 20 units, providing sheltering staff as well as case managers and housing navigation to support people in that program. We continue to collaborate with the county and community partners. As I mentioned, it takes an ecosystem to address a complex issue such as homelessness. So we all have to work together. So we continue to lean into strategies that leverage the different strengths and capacities of our partners, both in the public and nonprofit sector. And then we're moving forward in plans and working towards developing a navigation center at 125 Coral Street. So that process is beginning, but as with all development projects, that's a long multi-year endeavor to see that project come to fruition, but we're taking the initial steps. And with that, I will turn it back over to Susie.
All right. Well, thank you all for submitting questions throughout the presentation. So I'm going to go through and kind of group some of these together. So you may not hear your exact question worded, but I'm just trying to create kind of succinct kind of categories. So the first question is around shelter, and this is around the vacancy rates at 1220 River and City Overlook. So Larry, do you want to talk about how shelter space gets allocated?
Yeah, so shelter space and those programs that are sponsored by the city, 1220 and the Overlook, the conduit is through referral from our outreach team that is out on the streets of Santa Cruz every day of the week, trying to engage people who are experiencing homelessness and meet them where they're at and put them on a pathway towards housing. And so a frequent solution is either a referral up to the city Overlook shelter, a capacity of 135. We're typically very close to capacity. There tends to be, just through exits for folks, a handful of spaces that are available. So we have sort of a constant flow of 4 or 5 people a week in and out. But capacity is typically very near full. And then similarly with 1220, for the most part is full. As we've noted with that program, we see some really good housing exits with folks. So oftentimes if we get a cluster of people getting into housing at the same time, we may have a few open spaces for a little bit, but we tend to get those filled pretty quick. And again, working with our outreach team works with folks. Sometimes it's somebody moving from the city overlook into 1220. Other times it's just other folks who were encountered in the 1220 program is a good fit.
All right, and so also related to shelter, does the city have plans to increase shelter space?
Presently, we are working on maintaining the shelter space that we have added over the last 2 years. So we've added those 165 shelter spaces in the last 2 years. So primarily, we're working to try to maintain that. But again, where we have opportunities to try to expand that, that is something we're looking to do. As I mentioned, it's not shelter capacity, but through the encampment resolution grant, we're able to expand interim housing by 20 units. And again, we continue to be in conversation with county and other jurisdictions in Santa Cruz County to see how we can expand shelter capacity, not just in the city of Santa Cruz, but regionally. So again, as we saw with the data from the point in time count, overwhelmingly, people experiencing homelessness are in unsheltered situations, and we think additional shelter is an important ingredient in this continuum to move people on a pathway towards permanent housing.
All right. This is a question about safe parking, a more general question. How do people in the community find out about these safe parking programs, and how do you get enrolled?
Do you want me to take that one, Susie?
Sorry. Yeah, why don't you tackle that one, Miley, please?
So for the overnight safe parking program, that where folks are allowed or able to park in designated lots, public lots downtown, the city parking office does outreach about once a quarter for 3 days. There also can access information via the city website. A lot of times it's interacting with outreach workers, either our own outreach team, outreach workers with other nonprofits and service providers. And if they do meet the requirements, they have an oversized vehicle. We do a brief screening just to make sure that folks, are in need of that particular program and service, and they simply then just go to the city parking office on Locust Street and do a brief, like 1-page little intake form, and they will be assigned a particular spot and a particular lot based on the size of their vehicle. And again, it would have to meet the oversized vehicle ordinance. For the long-term parking program that is at the Armory, that is run by People First, so it is a separate process. They do their own outreach for that program as well. They do have a wait list, so folks are encouraged to work with them and contact them via their phone. They have a phone number, website, email. Again, very similar situation where folks also engaging with outreach services through the various service providers also get directed to call them and put in connection with them, so they're placed on a wait list. Like Larry mentioned, that program is full, and they do have a wait list. So folks kind of just have to wait for a spot to open up. That program does come with services, and the goal is for folks to work on what they need to work on to move on to a more permanent situation. There's
another question that's related to shelter, which is how people find out about shelter options? Is there a public place to access this information, or do people need to be connected to a program to access that information?
Good question. There's a variety of ways. I think within the city, but also countywide, an important role in trying to connect people to shelter options are really outreach workers, both within the city, but other nonprofit organizations and county agencies. Really, the folks that get out and meet people where they're at, building relationships, building that trust, to have the kind of conversations, to have a meaningful dialogue around what their needs are and what the right kind of shelter options may be, and where there might be spaces available to address their needs. So there's no one spot. I think, as we mentioned, that's one of the things that we heard from members in the community who are experiencing homelessness in our listening sessions that informed the strategic plan, hearing about the complexity about trying to navigate that system. And part of that is just that process of getting connected to shelter. So outreach workers are an important link in that. And again, there's a lot across those organizations and jurisdictions. There's a lot of dialogue with team members, with one another, to try to assess where there may be space that could be a good fit for the people that they're working with. But it's a complex process, and there's not like a one single door. There is coordinated entry process countywide. That kind of is a queuing system for that.
All right, let's go to the next question. There's a question about the PIT count. And the person asked the question was about 36% decrease in Santa Cruz County, but that decrease was actually for the City of Santa Cruz. They were asking about the results in Watsonville, and if we, aren't we just moving those people around?
Yeah, there's no evidence that really links the decrease in Santa Cruz with the increase in Watsonville. Now, that being said, we know that there's a lot of mobility in this population, and there are ebbs and flows from one community to another. As I mentioned, the PIT count data talks about how nearly 80% of the people experiencing homelessness in the county of Santa Cruz are from Santa Cruz County, and it may be different parts. Yeah, we think the decrease in the city of Santa Cruz is really tied to our approach, and we've been working really hard to put people on a pathway towards housing. We're seeing that from the results of moving people from shelter into permanent housing through our programs and programs with partner agencies. So I think that's the principal reason. I think while personally, I mean, without getting too detailed about the methodology behind the point in time count, it is a tool. It's consistently applied. It's in every community across this country. It's high stakes for HUD, but it's not a perfect tool for measuring change and progress from one year to the next. And so while I think the trend is indicative of making progress, putting a lot of emphasis on specific kind of magnitude of change is a little more precision than I would put in that tool.
All right, we have another couple of questions related to encampment closures. Are recent encampment closures in the city related to the Supreme Court ruling or the executive order?
Yeah, and I think as I mentioned in talking about those two decisions, that really that has not changed the landscape here in the city of Santa Cruz. So the encampment closures that we've been undertaking recently are part of the city's normal process that we've been doing over the last 2 years plus, really focusing on health and safety issues of large encampments, and working to resolve those encampments, clean up those areas, and really connect people that are in those spaces with a pathway towards housing, often trying to get them in shelter first, and providing those services. So those decisions have not created a pivot in our approach.
All right, we have a question around affordable housing, and the questions are: how do people qualify for these places? What's the process? Do you need to be sober to be admitted into these affordable housing units?
A lot of different little questions in that. So let me try to go through them. So different projects have different income limits. So I don't have a good easy answer on what those income thresholds are for affordable units. And there's some variation on different developments. In many instances, there are not requirements for sobriety to be eligible for affordable housing. It's kind of the concept of housing first with folks, is meeting them where they're at in the process of recovery and not making housing conditional upon their sobriety, but rather that giving a stable place for people to live and then working to connect them with the kinds of services and treatment that may be needed. I think there was one more thing you mentioned, Susie, if you don't mind repeating that.
I think it was, sorry, let me see if I can find the question.
It was more about the eligibility or how to get in the queue.
And the process.
Yeah. And again, that differs depending on different projects related to affordable housing and permanent supportive housing. Some of it is through public agencies. Some of the developments, it's directly with the developers through the eligibility criteria. So there's not a single queuing system.
All right. We have a question about, are there workshops where people can seek help or find out where services are offered?
And maybe Miley, can you jump in and answer that a little bit?
I'm not super familiar, so I apologize. I do know Housing Matters does kind of a services navigation workshop is what I'm going to call it. So I apologize if anybody from Housing Matters is on the call or my information is not accurate. I believe that they do. I don't know the days and the times, but I do believe it is weekly. Right now, that is the only kind of workshop that I know of. I'm not sure if there's one still ongoing at the library. There used to be some volunteers that would do some as well. But I think Housing Matters is right now the only one that has a sort of a workshop space, I guess. Other than most service providers do have outreach teams, and that will be like kind of the first step in connection of meeting people again where they're at, whether it's on the street, at an encampment, in the bush, on the levee, and kind of just then working with them on an assessment and seeing providing what resources they can for them, and navigation that way.
And I would just add to what Miley's saying, really just emphasizing, rather than workshops being the primary modality for that kind of connection to understanding services, really trying to get engaged with, whether it's a case manager, outreach worker, housing navigator, connector. The terms are a little bit different in different contexts, but really somebody who can help be that connection to help demystify the system a little bit and really work towards seeing what your individual needs are and connecting with those resources that will support you.
Thank you to folks who are on the call who have said the service navigation happens at the Housing Matters campus Wednesdays and Fridays from 2 to 4 p.m. and the Santa Cruz Public Libraries Thursday 1 to 4 p.m. So thank you for chiming in. We probably have time for one more question, and this is around encampments and what defines a large encampment, and what is the process like for choosing an encampment to be cleared?
Yeah, so there's not a specific definition of what a large encampment is in terms of either the number of people, number of tents or structures. It is definitely over 10 is kind of how we've operationalized it here in the city of Santa Cruz. The process for determining which encampments will be closed is really driven by health and safety concerns, both for the community in general and for the people experiencing homelessness in those areas. Part of our mandate as a public agency is responsibility for health and safety in public spaces. So that really drives our decisions on any particular area. So there's a citywide team that does an assessment of different spots and makes a determination, and then develops a plan for a particular encampment closure. Again, the first step is really in advance of even any formal notice of closure, is getting our outreach team out there in those spaces and beginning to communicate and build a dialogue with people in the encampment. If they haven't already worked with them or encountered them or developed that kind of relationship, but really trying to start those conversations about next step and the place for them to go, whether it's shelter or other housing with friends and family or other programs, interim housing. Really try to do that several weeks in advance in most cases, even ahead of formal notice, and then getting that scheduled.
So I'm going to squeeze in one more question since we do have three more minutes. Somebody asked, who are the service providers? When we say service providers, what does that mean?
Yeah, so typically service providers are community-based organizations that are providing homeless-related services, or they're public agencies providing health services. So thinking of specific agencies, we've mentioned Housing Matters already. You may have a drug treatment organization like Janus. You have county behavioral health. You've got the downtown outreach workers. You have mental health liaisons that work for the county. You've got organizations that have outreach workers like the City of Santa Cruz. The County of Santa Cruz has housing connectors. So there's a variety of both public and nonprofit agencies that are providing services in this space. We've mentioned People First is operating the shelter up at the Overlook. So that's a service provider.
Okay, and then, we have 2 more minutes, so I'm going to keep on going with some of these questions. Several motels have been taken over by use for homeless services. Do you know how long people can stay there, and when a unit becomes available, must you overhaul the space?
Yeah, good question. It's really been the County of Santa Cruz that has entered into those relationships with motels to master lease and utilize those properties for homelessness. A lot of that took place during the pandemic, so I am not as knowledgeable on those specifics. It is also the case that some of those properties post-COVID and that funding going away, have been utilized for recuperative care facilities for people who are experiencing homelessness after they're discharged from the hospital. So I know Housing Matters operates a property like that as well. But in terms of how long people are in those spaces, it really depends on the specific context. Again, recuperative care through the healthcare has its rules and regulations. During COVID, for temporary housing during the pandemic, the rules were different, the funding streams were different. So I apologize, but I am not as well positioned as perhaps some of our county partners in being able to address that specifically.
Okay, this is really the last one. Does the city still work with the AFC Safe Spaces parking program? And if so, how does this coordinate with the city safe parking program?
So the city still supports, like the county through core funding, I think, provides support to the Safe Spaces program. But it is a separate program than the city's safe parking programs. The city programs are focused on oversized vehicles, whereas the Safe Spaces program are principally people that are living in vehicles. Also, for the city's programs, in relation to the oversized vehicle ordinance, There aren't requirements for registration and insurance of vehicles to be able to participate in the program, which is the case from Safe Spaces. So it's a lower barrier program for city programs. But again, AFC is a great partner in the community that's providing valuable services in a variety of ways in this space.
All right, so we are at time right now. We didn't get to some of the questions, but we will, if you have put your name and contact information to the chat, we will respond directly to you. Thank you so much for joining us. If you want to stay in touch with us, you can do so by signing up for our Homelessness Response newsletter. You can do that at cityofsantacruz.com/homelessness. And if not, we'll see you again in March of next year.
Thank you.